You're listening to Level Up Game Product Managers Edition with Melissa Zalou from IronSource and Joe Kim, the founder of Game Makers.
So welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Level Up, the podcast for people who love making, growing, and of course, playing games. This week's episode is the fourth installment in our new miniseries focused on game product management. And we'll be focusing on how to build the winning game team and how culture and values plays into that. As always, when it comes to this mini-series, we're joined by my wonderful co-host for the Level Up GPM edition, Joe Kim, who's the founder of the Game Makers blog and YouTube channel, and also by Sophie Vo, game lead at Voodoo. Hi both, and thanks for being on the show today.
Hey, Melissa.
Hi, Melissa.
So maybe we could first start, Sophie, by having you talk a little bit about your background in the games industry and your new role at Voodoo.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working all my career actually in mobile games, so I have more than 10 years of experience. And in the past, I have worked in different casual mobile companies, Wooga, at Rovio, and I started also my career at Gameloft, so I have a broad range of experience on mobile games and free-to-play games. And I indeed recently joined Voodoo as a game lead, and I opened a new team business there for Voodoo and just getting started. So what will be my responsibility there? As I have my track record in developing casual games, IRP-based games, this is what I will be doing, and this is totally new for Voodoo as well. So Voodoo has been well established in hyper-casual games, and this has been an amazing year so far for Voodoo. But then expanding further and complementing with my skills that I have in IRP-based games, I'll explore that market, building a new team in Berlin. And my responsibility as a game lead doesn't stop only at the game, but I'm responsible for whatever is needed to make a great game. That means building and casting the team and setting the direction and the vision for what we will do, and helping out on all the matters to have success with the team. So whether it's production, product management, whatever is needed, staffing, I'll help the team. But that's on a high level my responsibility.
Great. And Sophie, before you joined Voodoo, we actually did a video interview for my Game Makers YouTube channel where we talked about the importance of having a set of values to help define and develop a culture for the new team you were going to be building, what you're now doing at Voodoo. So can you talk about that presentation you created and why you think it's important to codify your values for this future team you're building right now?
Yeah, so it was good to kick off with you that presentation and that handbook I created. So my experience having led and worked with many teams, I know that it takes time to form a new team, especially in my situation, a new organization. I'm new in the organization and I will build a brand new team. It will take time before we norm and perform. So the idea behind that handbook, the presentation, was to define the values that are important for me, the culture, what I believe will bring us to success, and also give it as a tool for the team of communication, so we know what to expect from each other, and we have an alignment of what is important for us, how we should work. So that was really important, not only for me, but for the future team members and the ones who have watched that video, also to make the decision. If they feel that it resonates with them, then this is a place that they can join in the future. So no surprises when after they join. So I wanted to be also super open and transparent in what I believe in.
So I'm about to ask you a question about your unique take on DNA. But before we get to that, actually, I'm curious, did you create this presentation sort of years ago and take it with you as you create each sort of new game with a new game team in each company you've worked with? Or is it something you created sort of specifically for the role at Voodoo?
So that presentation is the result of my years of experience working and leading teams. So I have actually a master document that I kept alive over years and I refined, and that's what I work with the team. So it has evolved over time, but I would say that is the ultimate level of what I could have put together based on what I have learned. And in the past, I did it pretty high level with the team, and I learned through the experience and development of a game that It could have been detailed more. We could have talked more about certain things, how we do things, because values are one thing, but then how does that translate in our process, in how we work, in how we talk to each other, how we make games? That could have been defined better. So I wanted to, between the transition of two jobs, to take the time really to think like how could that translate in a work, and test it out by doing the video I did with Joe. I had also a lot of feedback after that video that was good, so I could refine it, and also positive feedback to feel okay. This makes sense for a lot of people, and something I can feel more confident about of sharing.
Any recruitment leads? Joe, you might have a new business model on your hands. I mentioned the fact that you have a unique understanding of the concept of DNA. In fact, you define the acronym a little different to how normally it's defined. Can you talk a little bit about what those letters stand for you?
Yes. So at the beginning, when I was putting together that handbook, I wanted to give it a name that was a bit more friendly, gamified. So I came up with DNA. I was thinking, okay, as the DNA, biologically, what makes the essence of our team. And then I wanted also to connect it with something that makes more sense, why that handbook exists. And I came up with Do Not Assume Handbook. So this is what the letters stand for. Why? Because behind that handbook is basically a culture, values, and how we work among people is based on assumptions. And I have had experienced that a lot working with different teams, joining existing team or creating my own. We assume a lot of time how we should work together based on our past experience, culture, what defines us. And it's through a crash that we find out that it was a misunderstanding. So I want to reduce a bit the friction from the beginning, where we lay down all the principles of what we mean when we say that we work flexible, what we mean when we say we prototype, or how we ideate, and really talk concretely about these things. So that handbook is to help us as a team to not make assumptions, but to really talk about the concrete things of how we will work.
Mm-hmm. And is the deck sort of, or the ideas contained within it, flexible, sort of based on feedback that you get from different team members?
Exactly. So that is for me the version that I could go as far as I could go alone, or with the feedback I get so far. But for me, I expect that document to evolve based on the team. And when we get started, then we go through each point and discuss it. Does that make sense for us? Does it work for us? And then we may try, okay, what we have agreed on, and review it a few weeks after, and adjust it based on the experience. But it is a tool for the team, not only me defining some rules in the team. I come with a proposal here, but then the team has to own it as well.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that you mention in the presentation is diversity, and kind of diversity of perspectives and backgrounds, and I guess also different ways of approaching game creation. How do you sort of manage to leverage diversity without letting it lead to, discord?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's tricky, because I would say it's very tempting to choose to work with people who think like you, who agree with you, and where everything is so smooth. And I have seen, especially when you have to create something new, something that is not of the known, you need that diversity in the team. When I refer to diversity, I really mean diversity of thinking and skills. So it can translate, of course, in different culture, education, but I really think of in terms of thinking. And the way I see it is that there's always that tension zone that is ideal, where too diverse, too different, then there's no common points, and this is just maybe chaos, conflict all the time. But too much the same, it's norming. So it's about finding that right spot where, to me, the overlapping point in a diverse team is that we share some values of how we work together. For example, in terms of communication, how we disagree. How do we speak up? How do we bring forward a problem? How do we solve conflict? How do we own as well solving these conflicts? These are the values that I would say are common to people in the team, although they might think differently. But the behavior should be the same, so they can, find a solution. So that is one thing, and the other thing is a long-term goal. So what I call like the vision, the mission, or reasons of being as a team must be shared. Because why would you fight, or why would you go through the conflict with a person if you don't believe in the bigger goal? So these overlapping points must exist so diversity can happen.
Right. And Sophie, you talked about some of the benefits in terms of being aligned with culture and values, but can you talk a little bit more generally in terms of, how important is it for a team to be aligned? And maybe you could also talk about the potential cost if the team isn't aligned.
Yeah. So for me, it is, I would say, fundamental. This is the most important thing, and why I spend so much time on that. Because I mean, in the industry, it's very tempting to go really in the details of what games should we be making, having a lot of insights, all what happens after. But this is the foundation, the culture and value, and the people you have, because the market is very, I would say, unpredictable. A lot of things happen. It's moving fast, and problems will arise. It will always happen. We will try something, it may fail, and we have to try again. And sometimes we don't have the answer, and we have to live with that for a while until we find a solution. So, what remains at the end of the day through the unpredictability, the stress, the unknown, it's the people. It's the people and values. In these moments, you know that you're not alone. Somebody cares for you in the team. We believe in the same thing, and we will continue, and we can find solutions together. So that is what keeps team together, because with no people, there's just no game.
Right.
And that's really important.
And you had a pretty big list of values for your future team, but just for our audience, could you highlight 2 or 3 values you think are important for teams to be successful or that represent the kind of culture you want to build?
Yes, and that comes from a lot of readings that I can share and mention later in the interview. But the first one I would say most important is the growth mindset. And there's actually the book Mindset that I recommend. But in that industry, there's many things that you don't know. And I look into people if they have a growth mindset, if they're what I would say coachable. So we have a lot of things to learn, and there will be a lot of situations where we find out that we don't know. So I want people who have the ability and the will to learn, to adapt, and to also admit that they don't know and they have things to learn to catch up. And the second quality then is, to me, ownership. And it's also one very strong values at Voodoo, and that I can see is reflected in a lot of ways we work. Ownership in the sense that everyone should feel responsible of the success of the game. So I like to see as well when people find a problem, they also think of owning a solution there and not just throw the problem to someone else. Or when there are bad things happen, instead of blaming, rather thinking and reflecting, what could we have done better, what can we improve, and moving on, so really people owning, of course, the success but also the hard times and helping each other. And the last point is respect to others. So it's more like from one to another. Respect to other, especially in a diverse team, we may think differently, we may come from a different background, and I really look carefully at how people respect each other and different point of view. I assume that everyone should think that everyone is smart, capable, and we should never criticize or blame others or diminish others. And I have seen sometimes that leads to that in a toxic environment or a toxic mentality in teams. It can drift to that easily. So I want people who can reflect on that it's never about one person, but about a situation. So they have that intellectual humility to see the other point of view and respect over the point of view and try to find a common ground for discussion or solution.
And let's talk maybe about how you implement a culture. Sort of how do you make it happen in both kind of new teams that you're building from scratch or existing teams that you're coming onto. What are some of the sort of specific steps you should take? And obviously, how is it different in each case? So how is it different for a new team versus an existing team?
Yeah. So for maybe I'll start with the existing team. Might be like easier for me to summarize it. Existing team, I have joined actually existing team. I consider that I'm the person coming after an existing culture. So usually when I join an existing team, I observe the culture that already exists. I don't usually act a lot, and I spend a lot of time with the previous lead to understand where they're coming from and so on. So I have, in general, not a lot of intention to change the culture, but more to improve or help the team, whatever the challenges are, to continue to align with how they have been working and maybe solve the things where it's not working. So that's usually how I do for existing team, and maybe crystallizing more how they have been working, putting some words on that. As for a new team, and that's what I will be doing. So I've been doing that also at Rovio when I was developing our own game. I start with, like I'm doing with the handbook, defining the important values. So then it's starting point of discussion with the future potential people joining the team or hires, and just see how we match each other. And then I would say second step would be having the contribution of others to make these values, whatever is the starting point, evolve for whatever can work for us as a team. And while a handbook is nice and it describes very concretely how we work, I rather look then how we actually work, so into the actions. And it's through experiences and mistakes and what we have done when we do a retrospective of how we have worked for a week or a month, that we can actually reflect if these values exist or not. But for me, the values, it's more a mental reference, but what matters really is what the actions we do as a team.
Got it. And Sophie, can we now talk about casting your future dream team, which is one of your missions right now? Can you tell us what that means in terms of what does it mean to cast your team, and how does that relate to whether it's the culture of your future team or in terms of the recruitment of your future team? It'd be great to hear a little bit more about that.
Yes. So you asked me before about the qualities, the values I was looking for, and this is when I meant by casting my future dream team. I look really, really closely into that. So quality, as I mentioned, I try to see first as well through the interview, discussion, and cross references. So people who have worked with that person. So really, I'm looking first into the character. Of course, then I'm looking into the skills. And I am looking also for certain skills in the team and complementary of skills, what I believe could bring the best success of the game. But I definitely start with the values. And I have to say there's no secret formula or recipe to spot these values from only interviews or technical tests. And I accepted the fact as well that you have to test to work really in real situation with a person, and that's why a probation period exists, to really see if that works or not with the person. But at least it's a filtering point for me during the recruiting process to invest more in discussion with some people rather than others based on these values.
Got it. And so when you talk about a dream team, you mentioned, so it's really more about skills and culture. Are there any other things that you look for in terms of people when you're evaluating them?
So I meant like as well the values and skills is, for example, something I've been looking at more closely now in my recruitment. I realized that when I'm asking myself what kind of designer do I want in the team, and I have a list of skills that in reality will never exist in one person. So so it's more about thinking, I think, of the complementary of a team. So I don't expect a person to have all the answers and having all the skills I'm looking for, but first the character, and second a set of skills that could complement with maybe another designer in the team. That is, one could be more creative, like very like looking into a holistic game vision and understanding really how to build an experience in a holistic way. And having complementary designer who is more into like system monetization, economy, more number driven, and both could work perfectly together. So I look really not only into individuals, but as a team setup and complementary. And the same way I look for art or programming. So really to people who can complement the skills, we don't have to produce the best game. And maybe also to go beyond what I call dream team, because that's also a dreamful term, but a way maybe for me to, at the end of the day, decide or feel about it. It's really, I think about people I feel really excited to work with every day. And I have been lucky to work what I call dream teams. And to me, I see potential friends, colleagues, people who challenge you respectfully and make you a better person in your profession and your life. And that's what I would call is a dream team. If we have people like that working together like that, supporting each other, it is a perfect setup for me.
Let's talk a little bit more about drilling a little bit deeper into your hiring process, if you can. Could you talk about, you spoke a little bit about it, but how have you developed your process for recruitment? What does that look like? And how do you manage sort of sourcing and evaluation of people you're looking at?
So at the moment, I am the one doing the recruiting. So, and I also noticed that as a team lead, when you are the one sourcing, it's more effective because you know better actually what you're looking for, and you can also spot it. So the way I look for people is mostly at the moment through network and recommendation. And I've been lucky to have a big network where I have a lot of names that were recommended to me. And the other way is also to talk about the culture I want to be on and the mission I have for the game. So I have to say, thankfully, Joe, when we had that video, I had actually really good people who reached out to me and where it resonated to work in a team like that. And then it went through the process as well of recruitment. So that's one way that I'm doing at the moment. And then I have the evaluation in several steps. First, as I said, is looking into more of a character, motivation. So by motivation, sometimes I have seen that in the hiring process. We go really fast in, okay, we have a good candidate here. Nobody has asked that person if they're really motivated to join, and let's make that person go through the whole process of recruiting. And I think it's a fundamental part to really check that the motivation is aligned. What for my future team I have to offer, be as open and transparent as possible to also let the person also decide and see, is it the place where they want to grow. Then there's also look into the culture fit, and at Voodoo we have certain values we look into, and some of it I mentioned. And the more technical steps are then technical tests, and then more technical questions for interview and cross interview, and that's it.
And sort of you've kind of gone into this a little bit, but how can you sort of test or check for cultural fit during the hiring process? You've said that kind of you're looking for people you're truly excited to kind of work with, which is obviously, I think, probably a relatively subjective metric. But is it something that you're sort of able to build formal tests for or processes around? Or is it something you just say, okay, I feel this person, also this person says, your deck resonated with me and I'm going to take them at their word for it? Or is it kind of more formal?
Yeah, it's a very tricky question, and it's I would say it's a part of the human nature to be biased and subjective about our hiring. So it's completely a valid question, but you can get excited about people just because you like them, and I wouldn't say that it's a good way of hiring just because you like people. But then how can you keep distance to that when you recruit? So I have a very extended checklist of qualities I look into people when I interview, and I'm helped also by different interviewer through the process and HR to cover different questions. So we look at it from different angles. And as for questions, I actually read two really good books about recruiting process and in a more scientific approach rather than what we call a guru method where it's on the gut feeling. Work rules, and it's actually from Google how they do it. And they actually have a template of hiring questions you can ask to see how the person think in situation and not just random questions where you cannot have a tangible answer. And another book was Who. So really like very methodical steps on how you can recruit, the type of question you can ask, and how many people can interview through a process. So I'm using these methods to not fall in love, just with a personality and be able to assess properly a candidate.
Got it. And let's now talk about the other side of hiring where let's say you've hired someone. Unfortunately, you don't think they're the right fit for the team. How should that be managed? And I was hoping you could talk both from the perspective of sort of feedback and development and sort of course correction, but also if things aren't working out, managing a transition for that particular person.
Yes. So that unfortunately happens, and I would say you cannot be 100% sure after you hire someone. You have to test in practice how it works with the team. So the way I start when I see always a problem, I try to understand why. So there can be multiple factors why it might not work with a person. So it starts, of course, with a discussion with a person, but also identifying concretely where are the doubts and why. For example, if there's underperformance on, I don't know, delivering something, could be multiple reasons. Maybe this is the lead not being clear enough about the goals, or this is the person who doesn't understand the goals or doesn't want to do the work. So you really have to dig in to understand why that happens on concrete situations. So at least I try on my end as much as possible at the beginning to have discussions on the onboarding and supporting as much as possible on the onboarding, so this situation don't happen where it's more based on the context and the situation than the person. But if it comes then to the individual, and I have the experience where it comes from different reasons, can be the motivation, so realization that the place is not what the person thought it would be, the way the team is working doesn't match with what the person was looking for, or not understanding or not having the skills or capabilities to execute what is expected. So it's really about identifying with a person and discussing feedback, concrete situation, and agreeing on a time to give it a try. And I consider it always happens on both sides. It's a test on both sides to see how it works for each party. And in my experience, sometimes before when it's the starting, when you hire the new person, well, at the end of the probation period, then after you did a halfway review, and then you did end of review after 3 or 6 months, then you discuss, and then it comes clear as a conclusion that it's not working and we part ways. Most of the time, I would say it's come from both ways where we see that it's not working, or it could be also a wrong match for the team or the skills. And if the person has actually really good skills but are not well utilized for the team or the project, there are solutions to reassign the person where the skills would fit better or the culture of the team would fit better. And that has happened as well. So it's about discussing solutions.
Maybe as kind of a last question, I'd like to look at the industry as a whole and where you think the game industry is in terms of acknowledging the importance of culture and being intentional about culture and investing in it. When people talk about the game industry and company culture in the game industry, they'll often mention kind of more negative phenomena like crunching, for example. In your experience, which has been at several major game companies, have you seen the industry sort of start to shift in terms of how they how they invest in company culture, not only to sort of engage and retain employees, but also create an environment that drives creativity and innovation in gaming?
Yeah, in a big picture, I would say there's more and more awareness about an importance of culture in game industry companies. I mean, it's been game industry is still a young industry, I would say, especially in tech. But I have had the chance as well to work in organization where, from the beginning, the culture, as the attention to culture and people has been there. And I can mention, for example, companies that I respect a lot, King and Wuga, where there's really an attention to culture, and it's been there from the beginning, and you can see it. And joining Voodoo recently as well, a lot of attention to that. And it is not just nice words on a website, but really lived and through the people and how they behave. And my belief is in the industry, and sometimes because it's very also lucrative and very competitive, it's very tempting to go fast and forget that there are people behind games.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, there are cases also of companies who want to get fast in the market, and it ends up in crunch time and not respecting people. And I call that like going for a sprint. But in the end, if you look at how the market is, free to play games, it is a marathon, and it's really hard, it's tough, and there are going to be a lot of hurdles on the way. And as I said, what remains at the end of the day, even in the hardest moments, it's the people and your values. So I hope that more companies will become more aware of that and invest in that. And I've seen attempts as well to invest in the culture, but I've seen that from the bottom up. And I think this is not the way. It has to come from the leadership. They have to drive the initiative and lead what they think is important, what they value. And if it's the culture, it has to be supported by the leadership. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope and wish to see more of that happening in the industry. And I was happy after the video interview, I was reached out by a lot of companies who value the same thing. And I'd like to see that more in the future.
Agreed. Well, thank you very much for being with us, Sophie. It's been super interesting, and obviously, we wish you the best of luck in building your team and your game. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Tune in next episode for more game product managers talking all things GPM related here on Level Up.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.